One more to go. Jeremy, it's your turn.
It's my turn, Quita, and it's not Miss Culpepper, y'all. She likes Quita, just letting it be known. Name's Jeremy Teal. I am the director of Beyond Brother, which is an amazing organization for men of color, more geared towards Black men and their experiences, creating and cultivating safe space for them to be exactly who they are, which is powerful people. I think it's super important for us to be here right now. And I say us, I always speak in us because I feel like we are connected on a much bigger and deeper level. And I want us to be here at this conversation to speak on behalf of the people who are truly terrified and have little to no clue what's happening on the back end. And if I can just have a seat at this table and listen out for them and hopefully learn a few things, that'd be great. And it'd be even better if I could help make some decisions. So yeah, that's why I think it's important for me to be here.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. And just a quick note, it looked like our audio was a little messed up earlier. That should be fixed now. Thank you very much to all of the people behind the scenes. And I'm getting a message on my computer that my internet is unstable. So if I suddenly freeze or disappear, Casandra will be there to jump in and take over. But let's start with our questions now. And the first question I have is, how do you feel about the protests happening, well, here in Alston, around the country, and around the world? Who would like to start?
I'll jump in here. I have been as part of the being part of APD and part of the group that has been involved from day one with everything. I can just tell you, speaking personally, it's heartbreaking. I understand the pain. I understand the pain. I understand where that's coming from. Being a part of a marginalized community, I can get it. In no way can I ever imagine what it is to be a person of color, because God didn't grant me those gifts. But I certainly can see the reaction in the crowd. I can see the fear. I can see the anxiety, and I get it. It's heartbreaking that individuals in my profession, because of our lack of not listening, because of our lack of not actually putting the systems in place to where the community feels respected and trusted, that it's led to this. Myself personally, what happened in Minneapolis is absolutely criminal and disgusting. And it is something that I have said repetitively, and I'll continue to say. Every one of those 4 officers need to be held criminally responsible for their actions, without a doubt. But that's only the beginning of where we need to go from there. As heartbreaking as this is, I'm happy in that it is opening up a dialogue like what we have here today. So that we can have these conversations, so that us as law enforcement officers can really hold a mirror up to ourselves and hold ourselves accountable for the things that we've done. I'm not responsible for everything else anybody else that's worn a badge has done, but I can definitely recognize the areas in our community and in our profession where we need to improve. And I want to be a change agent to help that happen moving forward.
And Officer Danielle, I want to hear from you about this as well, because this also has a very spiritual component to it.
Way to sneak that in. Yes, it does. To me, I think that there is something deeper happening in reference to what has occurred. I think that it's important for balance to be found. And in order to have balance, chaos has to exist. And somebody that understands the duality in that. Although we've been having discussions and conversations about racism in very uncomfortable ways within the department, the incremental reform did not get us to a point where we can say completely and without a doubt that that we're trucking along the way we're supposed to be trucking along. So the protests, to me, although under tragic circumstances, and I agree with Sergeant Crumrine in that the officers need to be held accountable to the highest degree. I also think that if I wasn't able to put a fire under, executive staff, hopefully this is the thing to do so, because it's not like the conversation hasn't been had. The conversations have been had. And now we're in a space where now we're just looking at you to see what it is that you're going to do. So I think that in the balance of the chaos and the energy that is being emitted out in the world, this is the time to really focus on what to do to balance the energies, what to do to make people feel equitable, safe, and cared for within their communities.
Officer Danielle, thank you so much for that. And Jeremy, I also want to hear from you, because you're like a direct link to the young men, the young people out there that you're working with and hearing from. What are they saying and feeling about what's going on right now?
Well, I do think that the feeling across the board for Black men right now is finally, right? Like finally you can see what we're feeling, or you can understand the anxieties that go through our brains when we step outside of our doors. And more often than not, even when we're in our own homes, just chilling, doing nothing, you're minding our own Black business. So I think that's the feeling. But as far as these protests goes, I really feel that Black people are doing what we have always done, which is to be brave, which is to be, finally fed up and do something. And everyone else that is marginalized, be it people who suffer from abuse at home, people who suffer from all kinds of anxieties, people who have gone through a lot of things in their lives, racially or gender-wise or sexually or whatever, they are they're with us because they get it. There is a real issue at hand here, which is different is not good. And people really just need to understand that Black people are just people. And I think everyone else with this all lives matter quote thing, that's what they're trying to say, but they're not really understanding that the Black lives are the ones that are moving it. Like, we're the ones that painted the mural. We're the one that created the website. And you're really just following us, which is fine. It's down. So I feel like that's what it is. It's like people are finally getting it. People are finally listening. People are finally getting to see what it is that goes through our minds every single day.
Christian, is there anything
what happened?
Oh, no, you're fine. Don't worry, you're fine, Sharon. Well, Christian, is there anything that you would like to add to this, especially since people want to talk to APD, they want to get their points across, but I mean, how can this even happen? How can we really help build a dialogue?
Yes, most definitely. And just like Officer Danielle was talking about, we've had these conversations in the past. When coming from an education background as a former teacher, you have those conversations in the classroom with young people, high school students, middle school students, what is it like growing up with parents who talk about their history, or what you currently face, as a young person. And it's unfortunate, and also like Sergeant Crumrine was talking about, that it had to get to this point, and that people are coming and having to voice their own, what they actually are feeling at the moment, and oftentimes, it can be chaos. It can be through other means, but it is a perfect opportunity to also finally make some changes, and we can hear the frustration that people have. They want transparency. I think they want people to be held accountable, just like we saw over there in Minneapolis. They want a true leadership coming from all kinds of level to ensure that this doesn't happen again, and that we can come up with a system that can an open and safe environment for them to come forward we can hear them out. How do you envision the police department? How do you envision community programs like the one that I'm doing, and taking apart the solution to the major problem?
All right, Christian, thank you so much. And this actually brings me to our next question. What are some of the obstacles to real reform within the police department? And Detective Laura, I'd like for you to start with that one, if you don't mind.
All right, I'm not sure if you can hear me or not. I don't know if it's cutting out or if everything's okay. Some of the obstacles, obviously, I think people want change, right? And right now we're having those conversations as a community, with the police department. Change doesn't happen overnight. This is going to have to be a constant change. It's not something, that we can say, hey, we're putting this policy into place tomorrow to do this. We've listened to the community, let's do this. It's something that has to be ongoing. We have to keep having these conversations. We have to keep updating the training. We have to be open-minded. I guess one of the things is, we have to be clear. When we're doing something, when there's a police action taking place, be clear, be open about what's happening, communicate that dialogue, say, hey, you were stopped because of this, or you're being arrested because of this, explain every step of the process, or we're here because this happened. If people have questions, be open and be honest about it. There's no need to shut that off. If people have questions, we have to be open to answering them honestly.
And Sergeant Mike, what about you? What do you think are some of the obstacles to real reform within APD?
I think one of the, I think there's a couple of major obstacles. First and foremost, I think you have to have buy-in from the leadership of this department that things are going to be changed, and that we're going to put those in place. There's been many things I know that our organization has pushed forward. There's been many things that I know that Officer Danielle has been a part of, and they haven't quite materialized yet. If you make promises to the community, those promises need to be kept, regardless. And I think you need to have people that are willing to speak truth to power, and that power has to listen. And listen to what the community has said, and move forward. It's a process, and it's going to be, it can be painful a little bit, but it doesn't have to be painful if everybody understands that we're moving towards the goal of treating every single person that we have the privilege of serving with dignity and respect. And what exactly does those look like? Let's not just talk about those words, but let's be specific about that. Let's own what our history has been as a profession. Let's own what our history has been as law enforcement in this country, both nationally as well as specifically here in Austin. Those things have to occur. But when you continue to delay and hold back on changes that need to be done, that creates other issues moving forward. I think if we're truly going to be public servants, then we need to have the public working with us, identifying issues on how we can be better. You look at every major corporation in the world that has been successful, that's been around for decades. You can run down the list from General Motors to Apple to Facebook to on and on and on and on. Every one of them, the only reason that they stay successful is because they periodically self-evaluate themselves, and they see what they do well and they see what they can improve on. And we haven't quite done that here in this department. Even though there has been many experts and many people among the ranks, individuals that are of the queer community, individuals of other marginalized communities that have spoken that truth, it has not fallen on the most receptive of ears. So that's moving forward, in my personal opinion, the things that need to be changed in order to have us truly represent and be true public servants and be the guardians that I know that we should be of our community.
Officer Danielle, I know Sergeant Mike was saying that you have been trying to move reforms forward in APD. What sort of reforms are you trying to see?
So I see it as a lot of people don't know the true history of policing in the South, right? We come in, you know, most of us come in with these hearts of just being a servant to our community. But in order to properly be of service to the community, we have to know the origins of what we come from in that particular way. So for me, a lot of the conversations that I've had is, first we have to acknowledge, right? We have to acknowledge what it is. The biggest obstacle I think we have right now in pushing anything forward is, you know, Sergeant Crumrine talked about, there are things that I have talked about, discussed in nauseam about this particular topic at hand. But if the organization itself has disparities and inequality happening within the department, how on earth will you be able to have that type of rapport and satisfaction in getting and mending hearts in the community when you haven't even acknowledged and put forth the right effort to make your own Black officers feel safe? So without that happening within the department, us healing our own wounds, healing the things that need to be healed within the department, making sure that I can trust my fellow officer and they can trust me, and bringing forth the training and the healing and the reconciliation into the department, we will not be able to effectively do so outside into our community, because we are a mirror to the community. So my conversations certainly will fall on deaf ears if in fact that is not a permeating piece of the fabric of the department. So we can't do anything outside the department until we heal inside the department.
You mentioned police training. Now, one thing that all of us have heard ad nauseum in cases where an African-American or a Hispanic person, Latino person has been killed by police is, I was in fear for my life. How can we reform police training to decrease the perception that Black and brown people are a threat?
First, it starts with verbiage, right? If we're talking about policy, we have to make sure that our verbiage matches the type of behaviors that we want the officers to embody out on the street. For instance, if we have conversations in the department about de-escalation, which we do, we talk about de-escalation being something that we need to do. But if you don't have training to let the officers know what exactly you mean by de-escalation in various forms, then now you have a bunch of officers on different wavelengths, because we all have our different perceptions of what de-escalation is. So if the verbiage is de-escalate, de-escalating looks different for me than it will for another officer, right? So training needs to be conducive to the verbiage that we are putting out there. And a lot of times that training isn't there. For instance, we want to be these pristine communicators, right? But we're not trained to be pristine communicators. There is training within a department, but it's not mandatory and it's not extensive. So the training needs to be retweaked to what it is that we're actually trying to emulate and put out in our policy. And right now, that there is discord there. It isn't necessarily there. The first thing that I do on every single call is not go for a weapon, right? So why am I worrying about that, doing that monthly? The first thing that I do on every single call is I communicate. So that should be the crutch of everything else that we do, but that isn't. So when I'm talking about training, I'm talking about if the verbiage is de-escalating, but we don't train people to be good with their words from just a minor customer service perspective, right? Get somebody, this was talked about with Fatima Mann, who's the founder of Community Advocacy and Healing Project. She talked about working for Apple and how they had pristine customer service in reference to their communication. And we have to think outside the box and maybe quite possibly have somebody come in and teach us to speak from that manner, right? You're on the phone with somebody from Apple and, you may be upset and they're just, I hear you. I get what you're saying. Let me see what else I can do, right? But we're not taught that. So training and policy need to be congruent. We can't have 500 pages of policy and then officers are out here taking it several thousand different ways.
And Christian and Detective Laura, I'd like for either one of you to sort of jump in on this as well and just tell us what you think about what she was talking about, the training and just de-escalation and how you communicate with a community. Would either one of you like to talk about that?
Yes, if I may, I guess coming more from a civilian side to the department rather than sworn, that goes through an academy and our talk more on the tactics side. For us, just like Officer Danielle said, she said it extremely beautifully as far as the communication. I think that is key in hearing the community, just like when I work with communities of color and the LGBTQIA plus community. How can we better serve you and how do you envision officers interacting with you? And most of the time it's just, hey, we just want to be heard. We just want for there to be further diverse training in the department. Just like people might come in with implicit or explicit biases, how do we start addressing that? Is this something that can be addressed within officers, or do we need to bring outside professionals on inclusion and diversity that are really going to touch and dive into those topics? And I think from what I've heard from community members that is what they want. They want outside, not related to law enforcement, to come in and really talk on those topics. They want community leaders, community members from marginalized communities to come in and talk to officers and for them to just generally listen to that. Hey, this is what has happened in the past. This is how I feel. This is how my kids feel. And this is how we want the police department to better interact with us. And I think at the end of the day, it's not about, necessarily reducing the tactics and the weapons and so on. It's just a matter of communication. And it's like, hey, do we have that communication happening? Do we have enough officers responding? Not necessarily just to all the calls, but do we also have enough officers, just like Officer Danielle in the district representative unit, enough officers to go out there and simply just do community outreach instead of just responding to some thefts and burglaries and robberies. Have enough officers to continue to build that rapport and just genuinely listen.
And Sergeant and Laura, I want to get you guys in here as well. But Jeremy, I know that you have something to say about this, especially as a Black man, because you know that a lot of people perceive you as a threat.
Yeah, so I like to refer to myself as an advocate moonlighting in many areas. My full-time job is a sexual health communicator and community engagement person for the Kind Clinic here in Austin. And one of the cornerstones of communicating with someone's health is making sure that they don't feel you are better than them, that you are coming at them in a way that is an expert telling a novice, right? It is their health, it is their wellness, and you are there as a professional to facilitate a conversation to help them better take care of themselves at their own pace, in their own time. And I think what communication is supposed to be, not just in sexual health, but now in what we're talking about in policing and with Black bodies and with brown bodies, is we have to have communicators that come in not ready to debate, and people that are coming in not ready to be right or correct. People need, in communication, you have to be able to just talk. If a person's yelling at you and you can keep it calm and get to the point, that's communication. Now, if you start yelling at somebody at work, if somebody starts yelling at you at work and you start yelling back, how are you going to get your job done? You can't work like that. No one gets anything done by just yelling at each other. This isn't a law office. This isn't a crazy media space. We are not working at Vogue and Anna Wintour's behind our butts. We are people on the streets talking to officers about what we need in our communities. And I think officers really need to come off the pedestal and say, you know what? I get that. That makes sense to me. I can see how, me rolling up with 4 or 5 cars is super, it's too much. Like, you can't take that. Knowing the traumas that police have put you all through, knowing what you have had, what your history and what your lineage is, as far as being paroled, patrolled, kept in cages, sold. This is simple communication. Understand who you're talking to. Know it's not a debate. Try and come away with the solution. As simple as that, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm also an expert communicator, so there's that.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I know, Michael, you wanted to jump in here as well.
I did. And what everybody has said is 100% correct. We need to be better at how we communicate, but we also have to be better at knowing our community. And specifically, I want to delve down into understanding the queer community and understanding the most marginalized of all of the queer community, which would happen to be transgender and gender nonconforming individuals of color, and our interaction with them. We made a promise after Monica Loera was murdered that we would institute certain things in our department, and we have not produced on that. And that's been 4.5 years since her murder. And the things that we promised, we haven't done. But part of that is not only knowing our history with communities of color, but specifically what has been our history in regards to marginalized community, in regards to the queer community overall. What does that look like? How can we be better? You're talking about some of the different perceptions that we need. How do we change that? That was the beginning of your question, Ms. Culpepper. And I think part of that is everybody's fearful of the person behind the curtain, right? We saw that in The Wizard of Oz, until you pull back that curtain and actually see somebody for who they are. And what I mean by that is we haven't exposed all of our officers to the great diverse community that's here in Austin. We haven't done proper training in regards to educating our officers about the trans community, educating our officers about the gender nonconforming community or the gender variant community. We have not had those conversations fully in training everybody moving forward. So, I always say, what's the one unique thing about the queer community that sets it kind of apart from all the other marginalized communities? And that is, it's the only community that has every other single marginalized community inside of it. You have people of color, people of different religions, people of different ethnicities, people that speak different languages, people with different disabilities, people with that look different, on and on and on and on and on. And if we can learn as a profession to be more inclusive and understanding of the queer community, then I think some of these other things in regards to how we relate to everybody would be addressed. And these are some of the things that I think we need to do as a profession. I totally and completely understand where we have lacked in our communication, and where we have lacked in our relationships with communities of color. But I don't want to just leave it there, because we have to understand all of the diverse communities that we have the privilege of serving, and understand who they are, and understand how we can act appropriately. There's a couple of different things that have been pushed forward that hasn't come to fruition yet. The victim neutral affidavit, training every single officer on how to engage, changing our policies and procedures on how we document transgender individuals and non-binary individuals appropriately in our reports. Those are things that we need to address as well. So I think when we expose more of our officers to the various different segments of our community, that goes a long way. All of that has to be wrapped up in what Jeremy and Erica and Christian said. We have to be good communicators. We have to bring people in to train us how to be better at that. I've been a police officer 33 years. I can't tell you how many countless of hundreds of hours I've been trained on tactics and driving and uses of force and on and on and on. But we really haven't had a whole lot of training on teaching us how to be human and how to talk to people. So I think these are the things combined that we need to look at moving forward. But if we're really going to enhance our trust and legitimacy, we need to do what I call co-production of policing, where we need to have police and the community working together on developing our training, our policies, our procedures, and our responses to different things. It's not just the police. We need to work together in a co-production of making those changes. So that's how I think we can start. Just like I think everybody else said, we're all human. You see some of the things the LGBTQIA has done, but the program we put out last year, because people don't know us, like even people in the queer community don't know what it is to be a queer cop. We don't know anything about it. Erica was part of it. Laura was part of it, where we did it. I'm Like You. I think if we show more of our officers how, that our community wants the exact same thing we want, to be safe, to be protected, to not have their stuff stolen, to not be abused, to be heard. And in the same way, the community needs to see that human side of us as police officers, and also see that there is queer officers in the Alston Police Department. There are queer officers of color in public service. We see you. We're part of you. And I think when that understanding starts to happen, when people can see themselves in law enforcement, and law enforcement can see the diversity of that person as themselves.
And we're going to start taking questions from our viewers on Facebook in a couple of minutes if we get any in, but I just want to let you guys know somebody gave you all a very nice compliment from Catherine Gonzalez on Facebook. She says, if only these public servants were the ones leading the massive change efforts needed at APD. So you guys today really are helping to make a difference, and the community is listening as you're speaking out. And I want to turn it a little bit, and Detective, I want to have you answer this question first. Where do we go from here?
That's a tough question. I mean, where do we go? Obviously we're going to have to have some hard conversations, we're going to have to broach some very difficult topics, and we're going to have to open our minds to that. Going back to the training that we have received through the department, one of the best training that I've seen so far was through the CIT training. And through that is this new 40-hour training that we've done where we brought in outside professionals. Because at the end of the day, yes, as a cop, you want me to fill the social worker role, but I'm not a social worker. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed counselor. And the best training that I saw was bringing in these outside professionals that talked about their experiences and gave us a better understanding of how we can communicate with the public. And this is related, to mental health issues and how to handle that. And it really opened my eyes because, what do I really know about mental health? I didn't study it in college. I studied something completely different. But after taking that course and after hearing these people, it really opened me up to, okay, there's a lot more that I can learn. There's a lot more, that I can talk to with people and kind of understand where they're coming from and understand that perspective, and how I can help them better. So it's basically going into training like that, having somebody come in and give that outside perspective of how can we be better? What can we do? How can we make this department, open their minds to getting that outside training instead of just it all being, hey, let's focus on, defensive tactics. Let's focus, like Mike said, on driving and whatnot. Yeah, I've had a lot of that training, but, I also want to learn, if I could get a class from Jeremy in communication, that would be awesome, because then I could better learn how to communicate with the public, and get that dialogue out and get it started.
You mentioned Jeremy. I have to jump in there and ask him as well. Jeremy, as someone who is outside and can look into the police department, where can we go from here? Where do we go from here?
Well, I can tell you where we shouldn't go for sure. And that is back wherever the heck we've been, right? Like, I think when we look at data and when we look at stories and we look at film and we look at books and history, we have enough to show us what didn't work. And it is one of the best things that could possibly happen for humans is we record what we do. And I think what we should be doing is looking at situations over time and saying, okay, this got us to this piece or this place, but then it kind of went down from here. Well, who is good at this piece? Who's good at filling that gap and making sure that we as a department, as professionals, have the training or like we love to do in health, who can we refer this to? Who can we outsource this to? Because it's not like Laura said, it is not our job as police officers. I'm not a police officer, but I'd be a really dope one. It's not our job as police officers to be social workers or to be counselors. You're not. You're police officers. Like, that's what you are. And there are tons of people. There are whole schools of counselors and social workers. We have one of the best social work schools right here in Austin, Texas, like literally down the street from y'all's headquarters, full of people that just want to do that job. And I think that's where we go. I think we outsource. I think we learn from what we did and did do well and what we didn't do well. And the communication part of that is now internal with professionals. It's not out to the public. It's us saying to ourselves, I don't have that skill. How do I get that skill? Or how do I learn to notice I don't have a skill? And how do I build a network of people that have several skills that I can outsource to? That's really important. And Quita, if I may, I just have to ask this question because I'm not sure if I got the wrong email, but I thought this was about like Blackness and like protest and the foolishness happening with Black and brown bodies. It was not about being queer. So I'm a little thrown off by us avoiding the topic at hand, really, which is how do we do better for policing Black and brown bodies? How do we do better to help these people heal? And as much as I love queer people, because I'm as gay as they come, my Blackness is the first thing people see. right? They don't see my beautiful glitter. They see my blackness. So I'm here to talk about blackness, not people of color. Don't be afraid to say the word black. It's completely okay. It's a beautiful color and we look great in it. I just thought that's what we came to talk about. And I want to talk about that. I'm sorry. I just thought I put it out there, Quita. Back to you.
Honey, let's do it. Well, we're going to talk about it. Because it is. And that is like the crux of what is going on in Austin, in the nation, heck, across the world right now. People see you, people see Erica, people see me. And like you said, the first thing they see, the color of your skin.
Precisely.
I'm going to throw this to Erica or Michael now, because let's just get down and talk about it. How can APD relate to African Americans in Austin? Because, there's a long-standing, I hate to even call it a tradition, of not trusting police.
Yes, and I'm glad that Jeremy did that, because that is essentially why we are here. And a lot of times, what happens is, even in the conversations that we have, we try to navigate in a way where everyone is comfortable. But at the end of the day, this is what needs to be talked about, right? So my thing is this, and I've said this so many times at this point. The first thing we have to do is acknowledge why people feel the way that they feel, right? Which means understanding history in reference to slave patrols, because that's not what we're taught. The history of policing is what we're taught is there's this gentleman by the name of Sir Robert Peel, and his ways of doing patrols then sparked policing. But here's the deal. Policing in America wasn't started by Sir Robert Peel. Policing, the fathers of modern day policing here in America are slave owners. Period. There's nothing that you can research it, right? If we're talking about the South, it's slave owners. So we have to have these tough conversations and acknowledge, look, we have been skating around this topic, but we are here to acknowledge X, Y, Z. Now that we acknowledged, we have to apologize. We have to sincerely apologize. And then thirdly, the things that you can change immediately, you change immediately in policy. Anything that has a remote piece of some sort of racial bias, you change immediately in the policy, right? Because what you're saying is, no, we're going to fix all this stuff. Some things may take a little longer than others. The things that don't take long, we're going to do that ASAP. We're going to comb through our policy, and we're going to have stakeholders and community members with their various minds and perceptions help us with this project. Because if we're not doing these things and we're taking our sweet time and we're continuing the process of incremental reform and waiting for the energy to die down, we're truly not in the spirit of wanting to change. So yes, things take long, things take time, but there are some things that we can do immediately if the right level of executive leadership look at themselves and say, yes, this is something that needs to be done now. How can we start doing things now, coupled with things that we can do for the future?
Sergeant, I want to throw it to you, because you were talking earlier about leadership isn't listening.
And that's accurate. And so I the point I was making, and Erica and Jeremy, y'all are 100%, y'all are are a million times correct. We need to address the racial issues because that's what people see first of all, and we need to address that as well. I was just shooting for the stars and saying it's more encompassing. I don't want us to not go further than that. We have to address those issues. Number one, absolutely. And there was a proposal that I wrote up and gave to one of our officers, Jeremy Buchanan, that was taken up here recently. I think the first few weeks that you're in the academy, you need to understand the history, just like Erica has said. But it's not it's not what we're currently teaching. It's understanding slave patrols. It's understanding us as law enforcement. It's understanding the role of what we have done with marginalized communities and owning that and moving forward. And I think every bit of our verbiage that we have in our policies needs to be addressed and corrected immediately moving forward. But we need people that are decisive. We can analyze, but I think the community has clearly given us a message. Whatever we've been doing isn't right now. It needs to be changed right now, not 6 months from now, not a year from now. It needs to be changed now. And that's where I think we need to begin that process. And you need to have you need to have people that are leading that can make those decisive changes moving forward. So that's what I think needs to happen. And I think we've gone round and round on some specifics of things. But if we're truly going to address this, that's what I meant by co-production policing that I think Erica had talked about, and Laura talked about, and Christian talked about, and I think Jeremy has talked about. What I mean by that is we need to bring in the community and help us as we move forward to address these things immediately. And then what is the long-term plan? What is the plan down the road? How do we continue to evolve and be better? So that's my thoughts on it right now.
And we do have a question here from someone on Facebook. It says, how can the LGBTQIA plus community support efforts to change how the policing of Black and brown bodies continues to change? If you want to take that question, go ahead and raise your hand or start talking. Or Mike, you're talking.
I'll jump in. We've talked about communication. You need to communicate that. If you're part of the LGBTQ plus community, you need to communicate that clearly to the leaders of this city and the leaders of this department and hold them accountable in doing so. That's the first step. The other step is I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't know everything that there is to know. I'm a gay man. I get tons of people that come and ask me about different things being gay. And I'll say, you know what? I am a gay. I'm not the gay. So I don't know everything there is to know. And I will clearly admit, I don't know everything there is to know concerning Black and brown bodies and how they've been treated. And that's something that I think that this administration needs to hear from as well. And make that voice very loud and very clear to them.
I have to just get up in there. I want to push back just a little bit on that and just say that it is never the job of a person who is oppressed or a group of people who are being mistreated to make sure they come up to the front and say, hey, you're mistreating me. I think it's really important that those people feel empowered to do so, but also that there are steps or avenues in place for them to be able to do it safely, sometimes anonymously, and without repercussion. So that's that. But it's concerning the best way for a member of communities to get involved in these processes is to simply get involved somehow. Volunteer somewhere, start a book club, start having brunch at your house and having conversations about what's happening in the neighborhood, because really numbers are power. And people like myself have set out to become leaders on purpose because I have no problem going up against, a brick wall and arguing all day long about what I know with the information that has been trusted in me. But everyone that is feeding me this information doesn't feel that power. They don't feel that they can make that kind of change. So I think it's important to get involved. Find yourself a leader. There's nothing wrong with being a follower. Sometimes I'm a follower in a lot of ways. I follow all kinds of things that I don't feel like I can lead, but that doesn't mean I'm not making a difference. You know, me putting my piece in, me putting my opinion, my perspective in, it helps the whole narrative when it finally makes it to a policy argument or when it finally makes it to the desk of an executive. All of that is on that piece of paper, in those pieces of paper or whatever. So I say, get involved, find a leader, and remember that it's not your job. However, if you really want something, you gotta put in some work. You gotta put in some sort of work. It's very important.
And if I may really quickly, in about 30 seconds or less, just like Jeremy was talking about in regards to the officers kind of coming off of that pedestal, I think that is super important. You know, we start talking about some of the smallest things like, why are we having 5 officers having to respond to this call? And oftentimes, you know, instead of having an officer saying, you know, what's part of policy, we're like, okay, is this the same policy being applied to everyone equally? You know, or this is why the reason why 5 officers have to respond. Then we start looking at it as a whole. Is it really necessary? You know, and is it something that needs to be changed at a policy level? Is it something that a clarification needs to be made to the public? This is why. But I think oftentimes we also need to step behind, you know, as a civilian, for example, myself, just to follow people and just be like, hey, I hear you. Let's move forward and let's go and hold other people accountable, leaders accountable to make these changes happening. And I think there's nothing wrong with coming off of that pedestal or considering like, hey, the police department, we are right 100% of the time. We are just the ones that are going to make the changes. No, because oftentimes we are learning. Just like as the former educator, I was not always a teacher. Students, they're the teachers. We learn from them, and that's how we become better. So I think that is key in coming together, bringing people from different entities to really learn about the whole systematic failure, right? That we have, there's a failure in education. How do we fix that? This is how it leads to poverty. It leads to kids not getting enough education or proper education, can lead to crime and so on. And this is where law enforcement comes in. Well, how do we start addressing those topics while also involving officers and helping them understand that, hey, this is, yes, it is a problem. It is a racial problem. But also, how do we work together as a whole, as a big system to ensure that we don't get people of color, Black, Latinx community in a predicament that they're in?
I wish we had more than an hour for this panel because you guys have been amazing. So much just great information, real emotion. And I want to do this again with all of you, if aGLIFF would allow it, because people need to understand and hear this conversation, not just once, over and over and over again. So I want to say thank you so much to this panel for everything that you're doing and everything that you do, and for allowing us to just listen to what you had to say today. But I need to turn it over to Casandra Alston. She's the president of aGLIFF because she has an important announcement to make. So Casandra, going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Quita Culpepper. Quick. I'm sorry. I can't say it any other way but like that every time I say it. I also want to thank everyone for being here today. I really appreciate your answers, your input, your passion. Because we really wanted to facilitate a conversation to start healing. Watching literally the world burn down because there are people who feel that people who look like me should be dead just because I don't deserve, and it's not about me, but that we don't deserve the right to just live without somebody trying to hunt us down just because they think they can and they can get away with it. Because who cares? Because you got more melanin than I do. And seeing that there are people within the department that want to be agents of change and that want to communicate. I'm so grateful that Sergeant Mike and Christian, Officer Danielle came out, Detective Laura, of course you, Jeremy. Oh my gosh. Because the heart has to be seen through different lenses across all of our organizations and everyone that we talk to, so that they can actually hear it, understand it, and see that we're all trying to get to the same place. And sometimes, and every day, all that is we're all trying to get home. That's what I said. The first time I met with Sergeant Mike and Christian, I said, the biggest thing for me is a person of color who's non-binary, and I just want to get home. And I know that there's a weird fear perception of Black and brown, but the people who have that need to get over that, because we don't deserve to die just because you have a reflex that somebody told you once that Black people are scared. And I'm sorry I went off on a tangent, but I just really wanted to thank all of you guys for being here, being a part of our Pride Weekend Community Forum. And then I also have a very special announcement. So now I'm excited to share with you that due to the generous donation of aGLIFF board member Lenore Sheffman and Sheffman Law, we've been able to set up the Queer and Black Voices Unite Fund. This fund will be used to ensure that queer Black filmmakers, directors, writers, and actors are represented as a part of aGLIFF's programming every year. Filmmakers will apply for a grant, and those who are awarded will have all costs involved with submitting and showing their film during our annual festival and/or at one of our special screenings completely covered. Additionally, when possible, aGLIFF will also cover the travel expenses for grant recipients to attend the film festival, screenings, and participate in live forums, Q&A sessions, and other special events. So right now, if you make a donation to aGLIFF's Queer and Black Voices Unite Fund, it will be matched up to $5,000 to help support queer Black filmmakers, writers, directors, actors who want to be represented as a part of aGLIFF's annual film festival, and our year-round programming. And you'll find the donate for this now at agliff.org/festival. Whenever I say hello when we do our monthly screenings, and I miss all of you so much, and I cannot wait for our family to be back together again. We're a big family, and it is so important for us to hear stories made by us, about us, for everyone to learn and grow. The important thing to have everyone here and for people to learn about is to know that that's how we get empathy. Movies, storytelling, we were taught what things look like. I found out about me and who I was through watching stuff that I didn't, when I was a kid, that I didn't have access to. I was a closeted Christian kid. Then grow up, go to the festival, I'm seeing queer content. I forgot that was me that I had suppressed. The growth and the beauty and the love that comes from storytelling is amazing. And we need to make sure that we're telling Black stories every year, all the time, and educating each other. And so we are so excited to have this. Please support it if you can. We love you. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you again. And we will absolutely do this again, because these are the conversations that need to be had so we can start the healing and continue bringing us together. So I love you guys. Thank you. Bye. Happy weekend. Enjoy the festival this weekend. It's free. It's free. Bye, guys.